Oh my God. Steph Curry is a basketball god. There is nothing that has ever been like Steph Curry. He is the greatest scorer I've ever seen in my life. I just don't think that anybody in the history of the NBA has been able to generate points in an easier way than Steph Curry has. See, what Steph Curry was able to do tonight is exactly why I get so agitated when national media coverage keeps calling Steph Curry the greatest shooter of all time and kind of puts him in this little category, right? He's a categorical player, putting him next to the Ray Allens and the Reggie Millers of the world. And by categorizing him there, you can never truly put him amongst all the greats in NBA history. It's unfortunate that Steph Curry will never properly get the credit that he deserves as a scorer, not a shooter, but a scorer, because of the way he's been used by Steve Kerr all these years, especially the latter half of his career, where he's being used like a role player half the time, like his name is Steve Kerr in the back of his jersey or something. And this is why on this channel I regularly fight for these segments where Steph Curry is allowed to be on the ball and you allow him the opportunity to go on these flurries, because once Steph Curry has it going, there's no way any team is going to stop this guy. And once a team decides to double and trap him and stuff like this because he has it going and they're completely petrified of him, that's when the game can get comically easy. Because now the rest of his teammates get to play 4-on-3. Nobody in the history of the NBA has consistently and persistently allowed his teammates to be able to play 4-on-3 because the other team is willing to completely sacrifice and compromise the nature of their defense by trapping Steph Curry and allowing the rest of his teammates, again, to play 4-on-3. Michael Jordan has never been able to create that kind of advantage for his teammates in the half court. Kobe Bryant has never been able to create that kind of advantage for his teammates. LeBron James, Larry Bird, Kevin Durant, Magic Johnson, whoever you want to name. There's no player in the history of the NBA that has persistently allowed their team to play 4-on-3. And that's one of the many things that makes Steph Curry the greatest offensive weapon the game of basketball has ever seen. Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button, the notification bell, and hit that like button so that this video gets out to all the Warriors fans out there. Now let's get straight to it. Like I said, Steph Curry is never going to get the credit that he truly deserves because there's no context to how he's being used for all the casual fans that are out there and generally just stat watches and all these things. They'll never be able to fully contextualize the misused nature of Steph Curry on this Warriors team under Steve Kerr. Fact of the matter is, Steph Curry could be doing this on a regular basis if the coaching staff and the coaching decisions were simply just a little bit different. And this is one of the many reasons why I get so upset when they've been running this senseless motion offense all day and night where Steph Curry is not prioritized and he's standing in the corners half the time and is wasting quarters, entire quarters. And knowing what he's capable of course that's going to be really frustrating, especially when the results have been what it is over the last couple of years. And boy, did Steph Curry pick a good time to get really hot in this one, because the Magic got out to a 17-point lead. Well, 14-point lead by halftime, because the Warriors finally ran into a big lineup. And we've all been wondering and asking, how would this new starting lineup, the small lineup, do against a bigger team like the Magic? And well, we got the answer tonight. Not good. The Magic shot 83% in the first quarter from the field. 83% from the field. Unreal. Banchero could not miss a shot, and the three big man tandem of Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner, and Wendell Carter Jr., all three of them 6'10", simply made the Warriors front court look way too small. And yes, the Warriors got utterly outplayed by the Magic in that first half. They were about to be down by 17 points going into halftime until Steph Curry hit this ridiculous 50-foot heave. And what an incredible shot it was, and I couldn't even enjoy it in real time because the Warriors were down by 17, and again, they were down by 14 because he ended up hitting this impossible shot. But the timing of this shot is really incredible because it was 9 years ago on this day when Steph Curry hit that shot heard around the world the bang, bang, that shot against OKC. And interestingly enough, it was against this Magic team also about 9-10 years ago when Steph Curry hit another half-court shot that came at the buzzer, except the shot that he hit tonight was even further away. It's simply unreal that Steph Curry is doing things like this at the age of 36. He's about to turn 37 in a couple of weeks. Just completely unreal. 22 points in that third quarter after scoring 16 in the second quarter, and he has 43 points by the end of the third quarter. Unfortunately, he couldn't finish the third quarter because Steve Kerr elected to take him out with about 2 minutes and change left in that third quarter, and I just think that that's a mistake. When Steph Curry is white hot, completely unconscious, you leave him on the floor and allow him to finish the quarter, because Kerr ended up taking him out a little bit too early there. And the Magic brought it all the way back down to a 2-point game to close that third quarter until Moses Moody hit a really timely shot in the corner to close it up and lead by 5 points. And by the way, the unsung hero of this game is Quinten Post. Quinten Post had the best game of his life on both ends of the floor. And I guess you can credit Steve Kerr for making that adjustment in that second half by bringing in Quinten Post into that starting lineup to begin the third quarter over Moses Moody. The reason I say I guess is because you guys know me. I say go with a bigger lineup to start every game. The first and the third quarter should be started with a bigger guy next to Draymond Green and Jimmy Butler, and the game will simply be easier, and the Warriors wouldn't allow 83% shooting for the Magic in an entire quarter if you just simply started the game with a bigger unit. And this is why I keep saying we haven't seen the best iteration of this Warriors team just yet, because they haven't used the best possible combinations. You know, the small starting lineup that they're using right now kind of reminds me of what they did in the later part of last season when they elected to start Jonathan Kuminga at the 4, put Paz into that shooting guard spot, and Draymond at the 5, Wiggins is at the 3. And that lineup was working really well for a while, and it worked to an extent until it started to not work against bigger teams. They started to wear down, wear out, and that is why towards the end of last season, in the final 11 games or so, they put Trayce Jackson-Davis into that starting lineup, and they proceeded to go 9-2. It was Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, Draymond, and Trayce, and that unit had a net rating of something preposterous like plus 28. And that's not because Trayce Jackson-Davis is like a better scorer or something like this by any measure compared to a guy like Jonathan Kuminga, who can score way better than Trayce Jackson-Davis, but you fill this positional need with Trayce in there, and you have a bigger lineup of Wiggins, Draymond, and Trayce, and that's way more imposing defensively, and you're able to hold the other team, and that other team is never able to get comfortable, and the Warriors are able to dominate playing a different style of basketball. And that's what they can still do now, because they still have bigger bodies like Quinten Post, Trayce Jackson-Davis, and Kevon Looney. I don't know when that change is going to be made, but the small starting lineup, that's not going to work against the better teams with more size. And the Magic, honestly, they've not even been a good team as of late. So there's absolutely zero excuse for the Warriors to allow that team to shoot 83% from the field for an entire quarter. And again, you see the difference when the Warriors decided to go bigger with Post to start that third quarter. You also know that I hated Quinten Post in that starting lineup when he wasn't experienced enough, on top of Buddy Hield being in that starting lineup. That unit was a disaster to start a game every single time without fail. Every single time. But it did look different with Potts in there instead of Buddy Hield, and tonight Quinten Post really showed up on both ends of the floor. There was one stretch early in that third quarter where Quinten Post was able to score 10 straight points for the Warriors in the span of less than 2 minutes. And that 14-point lead that the Magic had to start the third quarter disappeared in the blink of an eye. And you know, I will say this, although Quinten Post wasn't ready to start earlier in the season, he showed way more potential tonight, and he's obviously been a fixture part of the bench units in recent games. And if a young player, and Quinten Post is 24, he's going to be 25 soon, so he's not exactly some really young rookie who's like 19 or 20 years old. 24 years old, this guy, about to be 25. He's on the same boat as Trayce Jackson-Davis was last season. So he is a pretty developed player. And I still see limitations from a defensive standpoint. Like, Post is not necessarily a guy that you may want to be closing games with as much as you would close with say, a Looney or a Trayce Jackson-Davis. But at the very least, with a performance like this, he's opened up the potential to get back into that starting lineup so that the Warriors can start bigger and make the game easier for guys like Draymond and Jimmy Butler. Because to start the game in the first quarter, Butler and Draymond Green looked completely overwhelmed against this bigger Magic team. And we saw a lot of different lineups in particular in tonight's game because obviously the smaller units were not working. We even saw Kevin Knox in the rotation in the first half of the game. And even though he ended up being a +4 in the 5 minutes that he did play, I didn't necessarily love his presence, especially because I want to see the Warriors go bigger. And Knox should probably be at the 3, not the 4. But that's of course where Steve Kerr put him at. And he put him next to Buddy Hield on the floor at the same time. And oh my goodness, Buddy Hield, Kevin Knox on the floor at the same time. What are we doing? Are we just ignoring the defensive end of the floor? Do we just not care about that end of the floor at all? Because you put combinations like that out there, that's what it's going to look like. Buddy Hield can destroy so many lineups because if there's a neutral or a weak guy on top of Buddy Hield on the floor, your defense is going to get broken. That's why the Quinten Post Buddy Hield combination doesn't really work. But to close the game, obviously Quinten Post ended up staying to close because he was playing so well. So the lineup ended up being Steph Curry, Pods, Jimmy Butler, Draymond, and Quinten Post. But I think that lineup was used a little bit too much. I think to close the game, you need to go to defensive-centric lineups. So needless to say, Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, and Draymond Green will always be in the game. Now it's a matter of the next 2 guys that need to be on the floor. And I just see Pods in there to close the game in a tight situation, and I just don't really trust him. In a tight situation, you need guys that are utterly reliable, and I just don't see that from Pods. I would rather have Moses Moody in there over Pods, to be honest with you. But if you want to be the defensively strongest version to close a game, it's probably going to have to be GP2 in there. And at the center spot, you probably want to go with Trayce or Looney. And since Trayce is out of the rotation and Steve is not using him anytime soon, at the very least, you got to put Looney in there. But to be honest, I feel like Trayce Jackson-Davis would be a better second unit player that comes off the bench for this team than Looney. Unless there are very specific matchups out there, because Looney has not been doing a very good job as of late. And he provides very little rim protection. But in the final seconds of the game, Steve actually did elect to go to that all-defensive unit. Steph Curry, GP2, Butler, Draymond, and Looney. And if you want to close the game strong, those are the kinds of units that you're going to have to put out there and rely on the brilliance of Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler to carry your offense. Because it's more important that the Warriors be able to get stops than worry so much about, oh, how are we going to score? Especially when you have a lead. I would say that this was probably the first disappointing game that we've seen out of Jimmy Butler since the trade. There's just a complete lack of aggression on his end. And I don't know if it's due to the size factor. And it probably is because you're playing against a bigger team. You don't really have a size advantage if you're Jimmy Butler. And on most nights, he does have some kind of a size advantage against most teams. But you see why starting him at the small forward spot over the power forward spot creates an advantage for him to start off games. Yeah, at the end of the day, Butler only ended up shooting 1 of 7 from the field, and he was a -7 in 32 minutes of play. And his three-point shooting looks a little bit concerning. Like, he's getting wide open looks, and he's barely grazing the rim. And we all know that Jimmy Butler can absolutely shoot the three-point shot. It's just that he doesn't shoot a whole lot of them. But somehow, when he takes those shots, it still looks like his legs are not under him. And I wonder if this is an age factor, and I wonder if this is a situation that is here to stay in terms of his unreliability from the three-point line. Hopefully not. I don't believe that. I think he will find his legs somewhere along the way, and he'll be able to start knocking down those three-point shots with more frequency. But in real time, it's pretty frustrating. He shot 1 of 14 from the three-point line since joining the Warriors. It quite reminds me of some of the struggles that Pods was going through early in the season. Yeah, if you can't hit wide open shots, that's a big deal. It's funny how it starts that way every time a new player joins the Warriors. It started that way for Dennis Schroeder. Even last season, Chris Paul couldn't hit the side of a barn when the season started. It's just a new thing for players who typically need the ball in their hands to thrive. And Jimmy Butler is one of those guys. But my goodness, Steph Curry, 12 of 19 from the field, 12 of 19 from the three-point line. 56 points in this game. So Steph Curry is actually only behind Michael Jordan in terms of players with most 40-point games after turning 30 years old. Yeah, Michael Jordan has 44 such games. Steph Curry has 39 such games. And Steph Curry leads all players all time in terms of 50-point games after turning 30 years old. Yeah, the greatest shooter of all time doesn't do things like that. One of the greatest scorers of all time will certainly do something like that. So Reggie Miller and Stephen A. Smith can cry all day and night about how Steph Curry is the greatest shooter of all time. I mean, I was calling him the greatest shooter of all time roughly back in 2013, for crying out loud. It's 2025. Update your narrative. As for players who have hit at least 9 3-pointers in a game, Steph Curry just destroys the competition. It's not even close. He lasts the next best player, which is Damian Lillard, by more than 3 times. And yes, this was just absolutely a godlike performance. Steph Curry is a basketball god. I've never seen anything like it. And this is part of the reason why I never miss a Warriors game, because I'm always waiting for this show to arrive, because he's capable of it every single night he's on the floor. It's the greatest show on planet Earth. If Michael Jordan was playing in real time, then you would want to be tuning into all those games where you have an opportunity to watch Michael Jordan play in real time. And that's the same thing for me when it comes to Steph Curry. I did watch Michael Jordan growing up, but times were different back then. Games were not readily available unless it was on NBC. So I only got to watch him whenever I got the chance to, when he was on national television. But when it comes to Steph Curry and the Warriors, you can tune in every single game. And that's what I do, and that's what I've been doing for the last 13 plus years. And man, 56 points tonight. They needed every single one of those points, because with the game winding down, it was a 2-point game. And Curry was able to hit some huge clutch buckets down the stretch of this one to ensure that the Magic wouldn't be able to somehow steal this one. I mean, if Curry misses any one of those 3-point shots that he ended up hitting in the final 2-3 minutes of the game or so, they actually might have lost this game. And boy, would I have been miserable if they ended up losing this one. And just like that half-court heave was not fun for me to watch because the Warriors were down 17 at the time, it would not have been fun for me to cover this game, even though he would have had 50 plus points in the game. That's how it works. There's nothing to really celebrate if you're losing the game. And if you lost the game and you did great things in the game, it really doesn't count nearly as much, does it? But an absolutely incredible game, amazing win. The Warriors are now on a 5-game winning streak, so this run is very real. They've now shown an ability to win with different lineups, different combinations, and a different style of play whenever they need to. And yes, Steve made a nice adjustment in that third quarter by starting Post over Moody. But like I said, he's basically overcoming his own decisions by electing to go with these smaller lineups to start, especially against bigger teams. We'll see what happens when the Warriors run into other bigger teams. Will Steve Kerr continue to roll out these smaller lineups and force the team to play with a handicap before he makes an adjustment? Or will he just make a new adjustment from the get-go, go bigger, turn more serious, and just dominate teams from the get-go, from the jump, and just play a more imposing style of play? Because all these smaller lineups, they're not imposing. They may be capable of scoring in certain situations and having some matchup advantages here and there, but it's not imposing, and against better teams, it's going to end up doing really badly. So as you can see in the standings, there's a really tight situation going on. The Warriors are still half a game behind the Clippers, and they got a bunch of pesky teams trailing them. The Timberwolves, the Mavericks, the Kings are on their tail. And oh my goodness, look at the standings in the Western Conference right now. Every single team outside of the Mavericks are on a winning streak. But all the Warriors can really do is take care of their business and let the chips fall where they may. You know, we've been having a lot of fun since the Jimmy Butler trade, but this one was by far the best of them all. Something tells me that it's going to be a really special run for the remaining games of this season going into the playoffs. That's all I got for now. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this game as much as I did. Until next time.